Hey everyone, this is Mr. Bear, and today we are going to be looking at the Berlin crisis during the presidency of John F. Kennedy. So our objective for today is that by the end of today's video, you should be able to explain what happened during the Berlin crisis and explain why the Berlin Wall symbolized the Cold War. Alright, let's get into it. To begin, we are going to need to rewind. As you probably remember, after World War II, the Allies, which included the Soviet Union, France, England, and the United States, decided to split Germany into 4 zones, temporarily, to help the country rebuild. The democratic and capitalist countries of the United States, France, and Britain made up West Germany. The communist Soviet Union made up East Germany. Likewise, Germany's capital, Berlin, was also split into 4 zones. Berlin fell in communist Soviet territory. As the relations deteriorated, though, the Soviet satellite states restricted Western trade and movement, and made especially clear through the Berlin blockade and the Berlin airlift that there was going to be a somewhat wall between the communist and capitalist countries. And this sort of impassable border between the East and the West, as I'm sure you remember, is called the Iron Curtain. At the start of Kennedy's presidency in 1960, the new Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, who took over after Joseph Stalin, faced a major crisis. A steady flow of skilled East Berlin workers were leaving Berlin and heading to live in West Berlin. By 1961, about 3.5 million people, nearly 20% of the East German population, had left, including many young professionals. This left the Eastern Soviet territory in shambles. Leaving Eastern Soviet Union was really easy. All you had to do was get on a bus, train, or walk, and you could leave forever. Now, most Germans left because in East Berlin and East Germany, they were completely controlled by the Soviet Union. Soviet secret police, known as the Stasi, watched all citizens. Many buildings still had bullet holes from World War II. Meanwhile, in West Germany, there were higher salaries, more consumer goods, and really a greater degree of personal freedom. Now, the movement of so many people away from East Germany and East Berlin was a bad look for the Soviet Union, as it proved that the nation was really a failure. So Khrushchev wanted to sign a peace treaty that would give the whole capital of Berlin over to the Soviet Union. And when he asked Kennedy for this, Kennedy is going to respond and attempt to show strength, and Kennedy is going to stand firm on America's commitment to defending the rights of West Berliners and West Germans by denying Khrushchev and not allowing him to take over Berlin. Now, Khrushchev is going to respond to Kennedy by saying, "I want peace, but if you want war, that is your problem." And Kennedy responds that it is you, not I, who wants to force a change. In this game of chess, Kennedy's next move was to ask Congress to increase military spending. Next, in the early hours of October 13, 1961, Khrushchev will respond to Kennedy's refusal to leave Berlin by ordering East German construction workers, who are going to be flanked by soldiers and police, to begin tearing up streets and erecting barriers throughout the city of Berlin and its surrounding. This is going to mark the beginning of one of history's most infamous dividing lines, known as the Berlin Wall. Extending for over 43 kilometers through Berlin and a further 112 kilometers through East Germany, the initial barrier consisted of barbed wire and mesh fencing. Kennedy is going to respond to this by sending 1,500 US troops to West Berlin. And for a time, Soviet and American tanks moved right within sight of each other. A war was threatening to happen at any moment. The next big event of the Berlin crisis occurred in 1963, where in West Berlin, Kennedy is going to deliver the best-known speech of the Cold War and the most famous anti-communism speech ever. Called the quote-unquote "I am a Berliner" speech, and given in front of a crowd of over 120,000 people, the most famous line was when Kennedy said,
"As a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner."
Meaning, I am a Berliner. There is an urban legend around this line because many people think that the phrase was used actually incorrectly by Kennedy and actually meant "I am a donut" or "I am a jelly donut," but this turned out to be false and Kennedy did speak it properly. Either way, the speech was meant to show Kennedy's support for West Germany, who felt trapped living behind the Berlin Wall, and also to show Kennedy's strong stance against communist aggression. Many East Berliners despised living in East Berlin, and so they escaped by jumping over the wire or leaving from windows. But over the next 28 years, the wall is going to expand, and this is going to make things more difficult. By 1965, over 106 kilometers of 3.6 meter high concrete barricades had been added and topped with a smooth pipe. This was meant to prevent people from climbing. Then, over the coming years, the barrier was strengthened with spike strips, guard dogs, and even landmines, along with 302 watchtowers and 20 different bunkers. A parallel fence in the rear set off a 100-meter area called the Death Strip. There, all buildings were demolished and the ground was covered with sand to provide a clear line of sight for the hundreds of guards ordered to shoot anyone attempting to cross. Nevertheless, nearly 5,000 people in total managed to flee East Germany between 1961 and 1989, when the wall eventually would fall. Most who left were ordinary citizens who dug tunnels, swam across canals, flew hot air balloons, or, the best story, involved an East German soldier who crashed a stolen tank through the wall. Yet the risk of leaving was great. Over 138 people died while attempting to escape, and many were shot in full view of West Germans who were powerless to help them. But the key thing here is that the wall is going to stabilize East Germany's economy by preventing its workforce from leaving. However, it will tarnish the Soviet Union's reputation, and the Berlin Wall must be remembered as a global symbol of the communist rule and the communist repression during the Cold War years.